my students play at lessons, and they think they're doing well if they don't make mistakes. And I'm sitting here champing at the bit, waiting for a mistake. Just come on, make a mistake already. It's a good thing because it opens a door.
Yeah.
It opens a door. There are reasons for mistakes, and they are not always because you physically did something wrong. Very often, see if this idea seems to work for you, we have an innate sense of musicality. If we start a piece with bad sound, that innate sense of musicality is frustrated a little.
Yeah.
So we've got this friction between the hand, the physical part says, but I'm playing the right note, and the ear saying, or your musical sense saying, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful place to go and say, so why does it sound wrong? It sounds wrong because it's not, but it's that, whatever. And I'm conjuring this, why start with that? Well, there's the D, that's going to there, but this. And I compare, and I see why it sounds wrong to my innate aesthetic sense. And the mistake, it's a wonderful opportunity for exploring what's going on in the piece at that moment. Unless you think that the mistake is the result of some physical inadequacy on your part.
Yeah.
But think of it as being a musical quandary.
Okay.
All right, let's go on reading some more.
Okay.
Am I talking too much today? I'm sorry.
No, definitely not. Should I go from the top or should I?
Wherever you want.
Okay.
So what's interesting to me, this is a complete sight reading for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
There are like 5 or 6 note mistakes that I don't think you knew about, which is very rare in my experience of you.
Yeah.
So why don't you do something that is very different than your normal way to sight read? Let's start. You got a few.
Yeah.
Right. Let's start here. And would you play a chord and hold it until it creates some sort of mood in your body? And then go on to the next chord. So you're freeze framing on every chord to get the feeling of that chord. Now, let that settle into you more.
Yeah.
There's a stability to that sound, and I'm not getting it. It's a foundation. Is the chord balanced between the hands?
Yeah.
Try balancing it. And if you have trouble balancing, just add in notes in between the hands. And that'll make it cohesive for you. Now it's sounding.
Yeah.
All right. Now what's the next chord and what's its mood? Okay. So the D flat's so buried down at the bottom of the piano that I don't really get the connection between this and the top part and the bottom part. It's that 4-2 inversion of the 7 chords. Try putting the bass note an octave higher and see if that makes it easier to hear that. So what you're in the midst of doing, Allegra, is something very different probably than what you normally do when you start a piece.
Yeah.
This is one of dozens of ways you can go into a new piece. Now, let's skip ahead 10 minutes in this process because I don't want to bore you too much. Now play the passage as written, except that in your mind, you take each of those chords, and it's like a balloon that you're blowing up in consciousness till you hear the full effect of the chord resound in your mind before you go on to the next chord. Each chord. Oh, can I give you an illustration? Did I ever give you my forest and the arboretum?
No.
Okay. You know how trees in an arboretum, when there are no other trees planted in the vicinity, they develop their full form. The maple tree looks like a maple tree. The oak tree looks like...
Yeah.
But in a crowded forest where the trees are competing with each other, where one chord is right up against another in time, their form never fully materializes because they're growing out in this direction, but another tree is growing this way, and they compete and they get into conflict. So the form never completes. It's all tangled, and nothing ever realizes its full potential. You want your consciousness to be like the arboretum, where you plant a chord and it can expand to its full form before it starts competing with another chord.
I like that.
Yes. That was wonderful. You're doing something that I'm guessing you don't do too often. You went for the music right at the start.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you should do this at all. You don't have to change anything. Or if you do try doing it, do it a minute a day when you're practicing. You don't have to do it as an just sprinkle it in a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you would make of the second section, the B major part. Now, ask yourself if it's sounding how you think it should sound, and if it's not, tell me where it's not or why it's not. I want to show you that you know all this. You don't need me. I'm incidental to the process.
Well, the most obvious one is I forgot to use soft titles.
Okay.
Anyway. And then, well, I would have to think what I want to do with that note in the left hand.
All right. So think about that. What do you want to do with that note in the left hand?
Well, I guess it's really part of the chord with the right hand. But.
And what chord is that?
E major.
Yeah. Which is not the dominant of B major. It's the subdominant. Yeah. So it's odd.
Yeah.
So it's like you're moving along and then you take this odd digression into the subdominant.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the end of the measure, it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Because the F sharp and the bass and the E that's all a dominant chord. But this one was a subdominant. This one's a subdominant. This one isn't. So can you feel like you're here, and then suddenly you're here, and then you go back.
Yeah.
And then you stay, and then suddenly you go there. Now see if that idea, rather than a physical approach, works for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Now the next thing I want to show you is how you can distort a rhythm. But play the B major chord there, any form if you want, and now play an E major chord, and now go back to B. Now what you did is you just spent the same amount of time on all three chords. Now, even though you're going to be captured by this rhythm, still let me feel like each chord has equal roaming rights. So that's starting to sound. Da, da, dee. Now notice that he inserts that. Oh, that's more poignant than that. Right, so da is really sort of an appoggiatura, I think. Oh, it's an anticipation of this. So very dissonant anticipation of the next chord. milk this. This is I mean, this is Brahms.
Yeah.
It's harmonically the richest stuff in the
Yeah.
world. Okay, but how would that sound if it were in the Arboretum and it had no competitors from that side of it or that side of it?
Yeah.
Ah, that's beautiful. Now, what I noticed is how beautiful this was, and how disconcerting that motion was to it. So here are various ways of my solving that problem. See, again, I don't think of it as a technical problem. I think of it as, what do I do with that so it doesn't interfere with that so much? Well, two things I can do. The first is, let's play that in both hands. Just take those two notes, put them like 2 octaves apart. Actually, let's put the left hand up an octave. And fill the musical space with those intervals. Now fill it with the second. And you know what else? Let's not tie anything. Let's just hear it as. Okay, now let's try starting with the right hand there and then bring the left hand there and see if you can still hear what you just did. So now you solve the technical problem with your ear instead of with your fingers. There are technical problems that you can only solve technically, but it's good to have sort of a sixth sense about which ones can be solved faster musically. Now, just as you realize that that E was part of that chord, and in case the dumb pianist doesn't realize it, Brahms puts a second stem sticking out of it. Would you play the chord here that involves the 3 notes, and maybe boost the A sharp up an octave, so it's the A sharp is in. So just listen to that, and put the bass note in. There. So just give me 3 notes now. Balance the hands. And now, can you change to C sharp, E sharp, and F sharp? You hear that sound? You're using your ear to do something. Your ear's like a lasso. And it's roping together the notes that are trying not to belong to each other. So now see if you can play that measure and hear this sound and this sound. Yep, you got it. Arboretum treatment for the it's da, 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 da. So make sure you hear the outline of da, 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 even though it goes between the hands. Yes. And here again, remember the da da there is not part of that note, it's part of da, 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 da. Yes. so forth.